Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. When I was in high school, I played on the basketball team. I played several sports, but basketball was always my best one. During my senior year of high school, sometime during the basketball season, is when this story takes place. I remember that during that semester, I had an open hour where I didn't have any classes. This was common for seniors at my school. Sometimes you could go to school an hour later or leave an hour early. Because of this, I would practice basketball in one of the gyms. One of the gyms was always open. We had a few of them, and there were no classes in the back gym, or at least very rarely ever a class there. Because of this, I would use that free time to stop by and practice basketball, shooting hoops, all by myself, which I really enjoyed. On this one day, it was just like any other so far. I went to the locker room first, changed, and went into the back gym. I kept an eye on the clock as I practiced here and there. I knew it was about halfway through the hour when I heard the intercom suddenly turn on. There was a beep, and I heard that the school was going down into lockdown. I wasn't really sure what to think. At first, I thought that maybe it was just a drill or something, but it felt like it could have been real. I was already by myself in the gym and figured that it wouldn't really matter if I just stayed there. The doors to the gym were closed, but I had no ability to lock them or anything. I just kept on practicing, thinking it wasn't really that big of a deal and not taking it all that seriously. I was dribbling and shooting in the backcourt when I heard a door on the other side of the gym open. There was a large divider which separated the backcourt that I was in from another court next to me. That court was also empty and not in use. At the time, I thought maybe it was a teacher entering, somebody going to tell me that I had to leave or something. I picked up the basketball and held it, waiting for the person to reach me. They walked right up to the other side of the divider, but then they stopped moving. There was only a couple of feet of space between the divider and the wall. You had to kind of move it to go around it to the other side. The person was not coming to this side, though, and I couldn't see them at all. I kept waiting, wondering what was going on here. About a minute passed by, and I could tell the person was still right on the other side. I thought about saying something or going over there myself, but I decided not to. Something about this just felt kind of weird. I walked back over to the locker room instead. I made my way out of the basketball court and through the doorways into the hallway. I didn't hear that person on the other side moving or walking at all. As I headed out of there, I went back the short ways to the locker room. It was about 40 feet, and obviously nobody was out and about in the hallways. I reached the locker room, but after trying the door, it was locked. At first, I didn't really know what to do. I thought about going back into the gym, but then I decided to find another classroom. It was eerily quiet. There were no classrooms immediately nearby, so I had to turn to the left and go down that hallway for a little while. Finally, I arrived at the science area and found the first classroom I could. I knocked on the door several times. I saw the teacher look through the small window of the door and open it for me. At least it was a teacher who knew me, which was good. I was led into the class, and I asked if anybody knew what was going on. I didn't really get an answer. Soon enough, I would find out. About 20 or 30 minutes later, the lockdown was finally lifted. The class was let out, and we all went to our next hour classes. Word spread of the lockdown, and I found out it was because a random man had broken into the school. He'd been found hiding inside the gym. It was then that I realized it was most likely the same person who'd been on the other side of the divider in the gym with me. This happened in my freshman year of high school. Back then, I would ride the bus to and from school every day. We would get there about 10 minutes before school started. After we got to school, I would usually go up to my locker, grab my book, and head to my first class. I still remember this day like it was yesterday, even though it was many years ago now. I got inside the school, walked up the stairs, and headed to my locker, which happened to be on the second floor. As I was grabbing my books and my notebook for class, the school intercom went off. I was confused, and everyone around me looked confused as well. There was a message that soon followed, saying that the school was being locked down. We were told to report to our first-hour classrooms. One of the teachers from a nearby classroom came out and started telling everybody to move quickly. The hallway swiftly became empty, and I had to walk a ways to get to my first class. The longer I walked, the fewer kids were around me. I had to go back downstairs, and when I got to the stairs section, nobody else was around at all. As I started to go down the staircase, I got about halfway down and was about to turn the corner to go down the rest of them when I heard what sounded like multiple people running coming from right down the staircase. My instincts kicked in, and I turned around. Whatever this was, it didn't sound good. My first thought was that it had to be related to the lockdown. I decided to try and take another way to get to my classroom. I would walk back up the stairs, go down the hallway, then go down another staircase. When I started walking down the hallway, I heard whoever had been running going up the stairs. They were running up the stairs as well. I didn't want whoever this was to see me. I turned the corner and went down a different hallway. I panicked and ran into the bathroom. I was too scared to go all the way to my classroom by myself. I thought the person might start running and catch up to me or something. I didn't know who the person was behind me, but I didn't want to run into them. When I got inside the bathroom, I hid inside one of the stalls and locked the door. I didn't expect whoever had come upstairs to even go near the bathroom. I just wanted to wait until I was sure they were gone. Soon, though, I heard footsteps approaching, and they actually entered the restroom with me. My heart started racing like crazy. I hadn't expected this at all. The person stopped right inside the bathroom for 10 seconds. I was afraid they were going to walk right over to where I was or something, but they walked right back out the bathroom door and left. I remained where I was for another minute or so. Then I very carefully got out and went back into the hallway. I looked around and didn't see or hear anyone. It was all quiet now. I carefully walked to the nearest stairs and crept down them to my first-hour classroom. I knocked on the door and was soon let inside. Everybody seemed very concerned about the lockdown. I told the teacher about the guy who had followed me. We stayed locked down for 34 minutes before it was finally over. Then things resumed into a normal school day. I had never seen who the man actually was that caused the lockdown, but apparently, he was found hiding in a different bathroom. I think he was going to try and go into the bathroom that I was in, but for whatever reason, he decided to just leave. It still gives me creeps to think about it. I work at a gas station. I'd been there for several years, and this night was one that I assumed would be like all the others. I came in at 8 o'clock and took over for the day worker, who went home right away. The first couple of hours went by quickly, as there were still customers coming in regularly to buy a few things or to pay for gas with cash. Between 11 and 12, it slowed down significantly to the point where it began feeling like the shift was dragging on. I kept myself busy for another hour or so, or at least tried to, with stocking and doing whatever else I could find to do. Then once I was finished, I was left with the dreaded second half of my shift. It was always slow, boring, and not enjoyable at all. At around 1 o'clock, though, a car pulled in and parked in the spaces by the entrance. A few other cars had come through recently, but just to get gas real quickly. Very rarely would someone actually park in the spots and come into the store, especially this late into the night. I stood straight and tried to rub the tired look off my face, expecting them to come in. A couple of minutes went by, though, and they hadn't moved or done anything at all. I leaned over the counter and looked out the glass door, but I couldn't really see anything. The reflections and glares on the door were blocking my vision of the outside. Maybe they were just taking a break from a long drive or something. I didn't really bother caring about it too much. I sat back down and pulled up my phone, spaced out and reading through random articles and whatnot. I did that for probably the next 20 or so minutes, and during that time, I never heard anything or saw anything. Eventually, I looked up from my phone, and my heart almost stopped. There was a guy now inside the store, just standing silently in one of the aisles and looking right at me. His eyes immediately darted away as soon as I looked at him. This guy looked like he was a mid-40s man with a dark jacket on and a big scruffy beard. I never heard him enter. So how did he get in so silently? Well, my mind was racing. I watched as the man kept wandering around, glancing over at me a few times to check if I was looking at him, like he was planning to do something as soon as I looked away. The last time, he suddenly hurried toward the front door and ran outside. I got up and ran to look out as well. That was when I noticed the car from before was still there. The guy just walked right past it, though, and ran out onto the road until I could no longer see him. I immediately went to the cameras to see how he got in and figure out what was going on. It only took me a minute to find footage of him slowly and quietly emerging from his car, then circling around the back of the gas station. There were no cameras back there, but those doors were never locked, since the gas station was technically always open. Anyway, what's especially odd is that there were 15 minutes between the time he went around the back to the time he actually walked out onto the aisle floor. Police came to help me investigate, ultimately finding the car he'd left behind to have been a stolen vehicle from months ago. They didn't know anything about the guy or his motives sneaking around, though he clearly had something else intended for that night. I think I was really lucky that, for one reason or another, he decided not to go through with whatever he was planning. This happened shortly after I first got my driver's license. I was about 16 years old back then and was driving an old car that my parents did not use anymore. I was really lucky to have a car I could drive immediately after getting my license because I really couldn't afford to buy one on my own. During that time, I had a job at a store about 15 minutes away from where I lived. I was glad to be able to drive myself to and from work because, in the past, I always needed to get a ride from my parents. Probably 2 weeks or so after receiving my license, I was driving home from work one night. I got off at 10 p.m., so it was probably a little bit past that time. The roads weren't too busy anymore, and I took the highway back most of the way. I noticed, though, that when I pulled off the highway to go onto another road, a car pulled off behind me as well. It wasn't until my next turn that I thought anything of it. I turned a little bit late down that road, not on purpose or anything, but because that turn just kind of snuck up on me a bit while I was thinking. I was really new to driving and made little mistakes like that all the time. Well, when the car behind me suddenly swerved to get in with me, I realized that it was really strange. They would only do that if they were intentionally following me. I drove down the road with this car on my tail. It wasn't right behind me or anything, instead, it kept a fairly normal distance of a few car lengths. I had about 3 more turns to make before my street. Soon enough, I made the first one, and the car behind me did the same. Each time I turned, I hoped to see the car keep on driving the way it was going, but it always followed me. I was getting close to my street now, and I was beginning to get extremely worried. I wanted to call my parents and tell them what was going on, but unfortunately, I did not have a cell phone at that time. Obviously, I didn't want to drive straight home. If I did, whoever was behind me would now know where we lived, and I didn't know who this person was or what they wanted to do. I was debating on what I should do, but when my street came, I turned onto it. It was something I instantly regretted because the car followed right behind me. Our street was really quiet. There were only 15 houses on it, and it was an enclosed cul-de-sac. As I drove closer to my own home, I knew I wouldn't be able to turn into the driveway. When I got to the end, I drove around it and went back down my street the other way. The car continued to follow behind me the same distance they had been the entire time. After I made it off the street and onto a slightly busier one, I knew I had to think of something right now. I drove down that road for a little ways and then decided I would try to go to a much busier area. The area around my house was very quiet. There was a lot of land and not as many businesses or people around in general. I started going back towards where I worked. I didn't know exactly where I was planning to go, I just knew I had to get to a busier area. I would feel safer with more people around me. Maybe I'd even drive all the way down to the city, but I was certainly not going to stop anywhere near my house. I followed the return directions to my job. Like I said, I didn't have a cell phone, so that meant that I could only really go places that I already knew the directions to. I didn't have access to an instant map or anything to guide me. I made it all the way back to my place of work and turned into the parking lot. It was a shopping center with multiple stores in it. The car turned in to follow behind me, but all of a sudden, they reversed, sped off, turned around, and drove away. I was really surprised, but I didn't take any time in driving as far as I could away from them. I went to the other side of the parking lot and took a route that wrapped around back to the highway that I needed to take to get home. When I drove home, I was very careful to look around and make sure I was no longer being followed. I got home just fine. My parents were very confused as to why I was late. I told them all about what just happened, and they said if that ever happened again, to get to the police station, which I wish I would have thought of at the time. To be fair, I didn't know where one was off the top of my head and would have needed a map to get there. After that, I received a phone only about a week later. Nothing remotely close to that has ever happened since then. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.